We're going to go ahead today and learn how to cut objects out in Photoshop, because if you're compositing, you're probably working with multiple photos and going to have to do that. The first thing I want to do, so I have a background here, probably not cutting that, but I have objects I want to add to it. So what I like to do, and I'm not saying it's the only way to do this, but my preference is to actually undock this file so I can see both files at once. So I go ahead and I click on the name, and you'll notice it kind of pulls apart, and I release somewhere outside of Photoshop. If you release inside of Photoshop, it'll often redock itself. So I can see this bowl and I can see the background. It makes the dragging for the cutting process just a little bit easier for me. It's just my preferred workflow. You may find a different one you like and may see a different one if you look in tutorials. So the first tool we have for cutting here is the Marquee Tool. There's a square marquee as well as an elliptical. The row marquees don't come in handy very often. So I'm going to go ahead and click the rectangular one, and I'm going to draw around my object approximately that I want to cut. And then I want to go to my selection arrow, and you'll notice when we roll over it, we get a little bit of scissors, a little tiny scissors icon. We're going to click and drag, and it will add it to my new file. Notice though, I still have the white background. So the marquee just cuts as is everything. I mean, really in general in Photoshop, whatever is selected is what's coming over. So if it has white, it's going to have white. There are ways I could still get rid of the white, but I would like to make my life as easy as possible. So I'm just going to delete this from here, and we're going to talk about other options. To get rid of this, what we call the marching ants box, because they're little moving dashed lines, we can just press Command D or Control D on our keyboard, and it will go ahead and get rid of what's already selected. The next option we have here is the Lasso Tool. How the Lasso Tool works is you'll click down on your mouse and you'll start basically drawing a line around your shape. You want to continually hold your mouse down. You release your mouse, you're out of luck. You'll notice it's difficult to kind of cut out your shape. I'm just going to quickly roughly do this. I've always found this Lasso Tool the least helpful. Some people probably have steadier hands than I do, and it works well for them, but just to show you what it does. The next one, the one that I've used a lot, Polygon Lasso Tool, harder on an object like this that's rounder, or like things like hair, but basically it's doing the same thing by putting a line we see, but I can just keep clicking to do it. I keep clicking with my mouse and putting individual points in place. And I could keep doing this all the way around. Again, you have to go all the way back to your beginning point to activate it, same as the last one. I can do that. So I could have spent more time and probably gotten pretty accurate, but it would be super time consuming. The last of the Lasso tools, again, I always struggle with because I don't have the steadiest hand, but basically it's going to approximate for you. You can click yourself at points, but it's still a difficult tool to work with. You're kind of at its mercy, or you're basically treating it like a Polygon Lasso Tool. Again, there are times where this is super useful. And for example, when I'm moving around the bowl here, I can get pretty close to accurate, so long as I don't veer off too much. But this is another tool that, again, only works sometimes. The tool in the case of this particular object that works best for us is going to be a combination tool. First, I want to select the Magic Wand tool. So what Magic Wand does is it selects, based on where you click, pixels similar to that particular pixel. We can set the tolerance. So for example, if I set my tolerance at 50, I click, well, notice it gets in because the peanuts are kind of light here at the edges. It eats into the peanuts and the bowl. We don't really want that. In this case, because I really have a pretty solid white background, I'd set my tolerance at like 5 pixels. So if I click again, it gets rid of it. Click again, I get a much better line around my bowl and my my peanuts. I can hold shift and add that little part at the top. Now I could try to add here, but it's going to be difficult. This is where I said we'd use 2 tools in this case. I'm going to go ahead and click, select the quick selection tool, and you'll notice it's got a plus. So if I start clicking in here, it's going to go ahead and add. And if I do like I just did here and I overshoot, I can hold the option and subtract this. I might over subtract just so I can get a little more control and then come back and perfect this. Once I get what I like, I would note that there are marching ants both here on the outside and the inside. So right now, if I move this over, I'd be moving the white area, not the bowl that I want. So I want to come up here to select inverse. And then I want to go to the selection tool. And again, I'll get that little scissors icon and I'm going to click and drag that over to my object, to my background, where I can resize it and perfect it. Sometimes, just as a note for you to show you a different shape or different object, sometimes in the case of this object, when I did my magic wand tool, with the tolerance of 5, it got my whole object. So I didn't need to add that extra thing. But because the previous one had a shadow, it was a little bit more of a challenge. So I can go ahead and, again, inverse this because I want the beard, not the background. And go ahead and drag that in. And now I have 2 objects in here to work with to start to make a believable image. So those are the different ways you can crop or cut objects out. It's important to think about what works best for what you're trying to accomplish. And especially while you're learning, it can take a little bit of trial and error to figure out the right one. But any one of those tools, the marquee, the lasso, the magic wand, and the quick selection tool can be really beneficial to you.